Okay, we are now live streaming and ready to begin the meeting.
Call this meeting to order for the Milburn Board of Education Committee of the whole meeting, April 12th, 2021. Veronica, will you call?
Mr. Bowman?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
I'm here.
Mr. Bouquet?
Here.
Guy?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Federini?
Here.
Mr. Quinones?
Here.
Shall we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments?
No, we do not.
Does anybody have any additions before we get started? Jason, I think you have something.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Adam and Autumn, who are joining us tonight. I'll start with Adam. Adam is our new special ed director. He's replacing Elizabeth Keith as the director of student services or special services, and he currently serves at the middle school as our assistant principal. So when Adam's moving in, right now he's doing both roles at the same time for the rest of this year and figuring this out. But as he transitions full-time next year into the director of special services position to replace Elizabeth Keith, then Autumn is going to take over for Adam at the middle school. So we have Adam, do you want to say a word of introduction, or I hate to put you on the spot. Actually, I don't hate it.
No, it's just nice. It's nice to be here. I look forward to joining the board meetings, more of them as as we move forward. So it's nice to see all of you and meet some of you for the first time, and it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you.
Welcome.
And Autumn is going to be new to our district, and she's coming to us from Belvedere, Illinois, at Belvedere Middle School. I can't remember what middle school it's called. I'm sorry, Autumn, but Autumn, go ahead and introduce yourself to the board as our new assistant principal at the middle school.
Yay! Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. And hey, Jude. Yep, like the Beatles song, he, whenever I'm at home, has to jump right into my lap. So I'm thankful that you guys are welcoming us both tonight. So yes, Jason, it's Belvedere South Middle School. I'm very excited to come to Milburn and step into an assistant principal role, leaving the coaching stuff behind, but not 100%. So I look forward to meeting you all in person. If there's anything that you would like to know about me or anything like that, please feel free to reach out. I cannot wait to get started.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, Autumn.
Yeah, Autumn is coming to us. We're very thankful that she applied for our position, and she rose to the top out of a very strong candidate pool this time. So we're very excited to have, not that it's not strong every time, it's short sell anybody else, but no, we're happy to have you and glad you're going to be joining us soon. And we've been in contact, and already it's fun to see Autumn's excitement about coming on board and being part of our district. So, congratulations and welcome aboard.
Thank you. We are glad to see you. Information on this. We have fund balances, contracts, parent involvement. Anybody have any questions about those things?
We're going to do discussing on these particular items tonight as we go through the meeting. Those will be relevant to make sure that we're giving you the adequate information to make some decisions on these board policies. So board fund balances is, we've actually discussed this for probably greater than a year, just throwing around some ideas. And we're just letting the board, giving you information, and if you want to change the policy, you certainly can. The biggest part of the fund balance policy that we're talking about tonight is what should our fund balance policy be? What percentage of our overall expenditures should our fund balances be each year? Currently, our target is 10 to 15, I believe, or is it 15 to 20%?
I think 15 to 20.
I could open the policy, 15 to 20%. That's been our target, and you'll see tonight how far we've come to get within shouting distance of that target, but we're definitely not there yet. So we can change it, we can keep it, we can increase it, but we want the board always to make an informed decision on that. So we'll talk about that tonight. Purchases and contracts, Dr. Johns wrote a little bit about that in his notes and sent out a separate paper on that. So we'll talk more in depth on that too. And parent involvement, that one's kind of just a new basic boilerplate. I think. And then we are done updating all of our oldest policies this year, just in time to start keeping up with more fresh policies that they just came out with another edition. So we'll keep always renewing and refreshing our policies and reviewing that as part of our role. So that's where we're at with that.
Pardon me, Jason.
Yes, sir.
Lots of 60 hertz hum in the background, and it's kind of drowning your voice out. So I don't know if there's some people that are not on mute. That's a possibility.
No, Jim, it's actually it's in the building here, so I apologize for that. I don't know how to turn it any more off. It's the fan ventilation unit in the library right above.
Ah.
So it's
okay.
You're not imagining it.
All righty. All right. Thanks.
Sorry.
Guess I'm not imagining it either.
No, you're not.
How is this parent involvement one any kind of different than what we already do as a?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's just putting it into policy.
Now it's in the policy.
Maybe not all districts do it, so maybe not. And we're gonna talk about business and non-instructional operations later too. Does anybody have any other questions on these policies at the moment? Summer school, what's happening?
Well, the brochure for the first session is done, our first run at it, so we will get that out probably by the end of the week and start letting people sign up. Our first session is going from June 7th to June 24th, Monday through Thursday, 9 to noon. So we have teachers lined up to do that at almost every grade level. There's a couple of grade levels where we don't have teachers yet, but we'll see what the interest is, and we may have to move people around or recruit. So, but I'm excited to get that brochure out and see what the interest is. I think there's going to be fairly high interest, given that it's free and free transportation. It's really a deal that I don't know how parents can refuse, but we only have so many spots, so we're going to have to figure out how we're going to limit and invite certain people. So I will keep you posted on that as we get more interest coming.
Anybody else? Questions?
Is there just one session?
2 sessions.
2?
So the second session is the last week in July and the first week in August.
Okay.
And then we have a 1-week break after that, and then school starts.
Yeah.
District goals.
Okay, we are on district goal number 3 out of our 5 for this year, and I want to share. Nope, not that one. District goals. All right. priority number 3, curriculum. So I'm going to outline what the goal is. So at the beginning of the year, we set out a curriculum goal as a board and administrative team. Provide staff with learning opportunities to support them in remote learning while adding diversity to our curriculum and using, I gotta move some things around so I can see it. Using the opportunities inherent in remote learning to strengthen resilience, problem solving, and soft skills. So that was our overarching goal, and now I'll go through and add a little bit more detail to it. So this year we had an opportunity to increase our professional development time. The state allowed us to use 5 student attendance days, and in lieu of student attendance days, count them as attendance, but allow our teachers to have those days to plan and train for remote learning. So we use those days early on in the year. In addition, we have 4 days that we typically have every school year where we have staff training and in-service. So we use the combination of those 4 days that we typically have plus the 5 days that are not typical that we added this year for a total of 9 days. We've already used 8 of those days, 6 of them before October, and then the last 3 have been since winter break. So we have 1 left on April 26th. We're going to use that for wrapping up, tying up some loose ends, and whatever else we need to do for ending this year and then starting to prepare for next year. So we wanted to support staff with remote learning by offering adequate professional development. That was written in the goal. Now, I want to say that adequate is not a defined term, and I don't think we could ever have adequate professional development for what we did this year. But our teachers have done great, and we gave them as much time as possible, and we balanced it with training, some direct instruction with teachers, and allowing them to have time on their own then to apply it in their classroom. So when we had a day like on the October 13th, when we had blended learning with Kip, who's an Apple professional trainer, he would instruct, the teachers would rotate through and have about 60 minutes with Kip, and he would present something, and then they would have time to go back and work with their teams on applying that to their particular grade level or lesson. So we wanted to balance those times. February 15th and 16th, same thing. It turned out that actually a majority of the day was time for application with teachers, but we really wanted to get some direct instructional time and give them tools and show teachers how to use the tools that we have in our available to us so that they can have a better learning experience for the kids. We also, I want to remember too that we have 3 full-time equivalents of instructional coaches as well. That's tech integration specialists, and we have a literacy coach. So with the combination of those people, actually this year we only had 2. We took one of those FTEs and moved her back into the classroom for this year so that we could have as much in-person learning as possible. But typically we have 3. This year we only had 2, but they worked really, really, really hard helping teachers on a daily basis with anything that they needed to. So that's very important and very valuable. Another goal was to investigate opportunities to make our ELA and social studies curriculum more socially responsible in both the elementary and middle school. This, I will admit, we have not gone as far as I would like to at this point this year. We have, this it's our first year with our new social studies curriculum at the middle school, and Jake's gonna point out a couple of points with that later. But we didn't get into what do we really want our kids to know about being socially responsible? What do we want to teach our kids about American history? What are some of those values that our community really would like our kids to learn, and at what level? And that, I think, is a huge discussion. Part of my hesitancy, I don't know if it's hesitancy, because I've thought a lot about it, I've researched a lot on it, but it's a big undertaking and very difficult to discuss for some people. So I would really like to do that in person versus remotely, and have those discussions as a community, because this is not the Jason Lynn School, this is not the Dr. John School, this is our community school. So we want to have that discussion and really understandings of what we want to teach our kids, so that we're not wondering what are we teaching our kids, and so we have a clear idea of what's best. Parents need to be part of that discussion.
What will that look like? Like a town hall type thing, open, like when the parents are part of that, or send out surveys, or?
I think that's a yes and probably included in that would be a focus group.
Yeah.
It depends on the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. If you want the broad strokes, we want to hit as many people as possible and do that through survey, using a thought exchange. When you take that information and start to narrow it down into what's going to be taught and something specific, that's going to be probably a focus group.
If you go there on the focus, you're not talking about diving further into this in the fall or further on.
Oh yeah, I think we'll be continuing this goal future if the board is.
Excuse me, Jason?
Yes, sir.
Is this going to be limited to the parents, or is this going to be opened up to the community at large, the taxpayers? Or is that decision not, or has that question not been asked yet?
No, I haven't asked that question or entertained. I'm fine with taxpayers.
Bullet point 3, right? Engage parents and community.
Yeah, 'cause that's part of the community, I would think, so. Typically, it's hard to get community involved because they're less engaged with the school, but I've always welcomed them in the past, their input. Because it's their school too, they're paying for it.
That's kind of my thoughts on the subject, so, okay. All right, real good, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Hey, Jason, I have 2 questions for you. So the first one is, so this seems like a multi-year plan, right? So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, like, what's your vision on what does this look like moving forward? Because I'm assuming we're going to continue this into 2021, 22. So is a year of fact finding and then a year of implementation, or what are your thoughts on it?
Yes. I appreciate that, Jose, yes. I don't know what it looks like yet. I have some ideas on what it could look like and how to approach it, but part of my, I don't know, I think it's a big task, an important task. So, I think it's a multifaceted approach and probably multi-year approach. I don't think we're gonna have 2 meetings and figure out what our history is, or if are we just talking about history, or what are we talking about when we're talking about our social studies? Are we talking about social issues or current issues? American history? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's all of it.
think you have to first start with a definition of socially responsible.
Yeah, that's the big.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the objective, right? That's the bullet, and you got your sub-bullets and how you reach that or measure it.
Definitely.
First definition of socially responsible. And then investigate opportunities.
Right.
It may be a far different discussion than even what we're talking about,
It might be.
right? If we talked about, okay, what's socially responsible? What are the opportunities to foster that? It may not be a big town hall, but you may need a town hall to arrive at the definition of socially responsible.
Jason, my second question that I had for you was, to what degree are other districts pursuing or investigating this same program? Kind of like, where do we fall in the mix?
I haven't seen a lot of this yet from other districts, really digging deep. I think districts do what we've already done as far as, okay, we're going to adopt this curriculum, and when we look at a new curriculum like we did our ELA, are we looking for resources that have reflect diversity, reflect our student body, and reflect our values of our community and our inclusive of all people, and not, are we missing opportunities with that? So I think a lot of districts are at that point, and we've been at that point. But I think what the board was angling here, and this has made good discussion and good time. What are we shooting for here? Are we talking about how do we teach kids about the founding of our country? Are we talking about American history all throughout? How are those narratives going to be presented to our students? Because there's been a lot of discussion about that, at least in the news media this year for sure, and those are important discussions to have. Tough ones.
Yeah.
So this conversation is leaning towards like the holistic look of social studies and social equity, opposed to actual curriculum, which we just got new curriculum, right?
Correct.
National Geo. So how do we use this tool along with our moral approach to the subject?
That's how I'm doing it.
Because it's not like we're changing the actual curriculum. It's what do we want to include so that these history lessons are cognitive of what, not just what we grew up with, or not just what, one is, but how these events impacted different people.
I think, at least with the curriculum that I saw, it does take much of that into consideration.
I think that was step one.
So I think it does. I think the curriculum itself does.
I agree.
I think the question is, one of the things that should be considered is, when assessing curricula in the future, can we have some sort of measures, right? Because I think there are fewer and fewer choices that will show all aspects, all perspectives. I think there are far fewer and fewer. I think even now, some voices are being silenced, just as voices have been silenced throughout history. Depends on what the voice is. So I think, we should, again, define what is socially responsible, determine what are the opportunities. And then I think what's also important is, we have a curriculum, but then once you do fact finding, once you determine what is socially responsible, and you identify opportunities, how do you exercise those opportunities? Is it supplemental materials to the curriculum? Because if we need supplemental materials, who's going to create those? Is it going to be independent, and will the teachers individually create those supplemental materials if that's what's determined? Or is there a committee that might, make sure that in addition to the curriculum that we have, these other things are stressed as well? So it's a big undertaking.
The committee could turn this meeting into 100 meetings.
100 meetings, and
Oh, yeah.
ongoing. I mean,
Easily.
there's so much. There's so much that can go on this.
So one other thing that I'll add here, and I guess it probably adds more complexity to it, is that I feel like this isn't a one-time exercise. An exercise, this identifying or defining what socially responsible means, it's kind of a point in time definition, right? Because the conversation that's happening today is much different than what it was 5 years ago, and it's like leagues different than what it was when we were going to school. So I feel like we can't just set it and forget it. It's got to be an ongoing conversation that the community needs to define at some predefined interval.
I mean, I think we could engage the community via thought exchange. It would be most concerned when it comes to community about people with children in the school district, because they have the most at stake, opposed to just the broad stroke taxpayer is probably not very interested, but there's ways of putting information out there.
Yeah, and I don't question about being interested, and I mean, I think that's pretty clear. However, when we look at the mission of the school, it's to enrich the community.
Yeah.
So I think they absolutely should be
it's
engaged in whatever ways we can. It's difficult. It's big.
It's one thing to post public information that's available. It's available for anybody who wants to seek it, opposed to seeking out trouble. Well, I just say, I think that kind of advice, a lot of cans of worms that might not even be relevant to the.
Well, I think I like a lot of what everybody's saying, but there's, to Sean's point, there's so much polarization now with everything, right? And nobody even knows anything anymore. We don't know if, hey, they taught us this specific history, well, we're questioning this, we don't know if this is accurate, whatever. So I think this does have to be a continuous thing that's revisited, let's revamp. I mean, much like many teachers do, I assume they do here when you give an assessment, hey, everybody bombed this one question. Well, let's take a look at it. Is something wrong with the question? So there has to be this ongoing sort of review, staying current, figuring out what's going on. But at the same time, I think we need to be cognizant of all of that polarization, all of that noise that's happening outside. That's maybe parts are accurate, maybe parts are not accurate. Since we're trying to foster these kids and get them to a point where they can contribute to the community and the world and be successful and independent, I think we need to filter out some of the, not necessarily nonsense, but there's a lot of misinformation out there on both sides. We got to kind of come to that point where we say, hey, this seems to be the most accurate. I'm glad that there is a curriculum in place, but certainly when you're taking a bent of social responsibility, that's a very quick leap to social justice, to these types of things. So I think you need to kind of tread lightly on some of that.
Yeah, agreed. And following up on what you're saying, I think in addition to defining what's socially responsible and identifying opportunities, because there's so much polarization, and if we talk about engaging the community and potential for a town hall forum, I think we should also define what is the appropriate role of an elementary and middle school in facilitating those discussions. Do we get ourselves in really deep in setting up a forum whereby the community comes together to discuss these things? Because there aren't a lot of forums where you can have both sides actually engage. So I think we should be very, I don't want to say cautious, but should be really looking at defining what is the role of the elementary and middle school in facilitating a forum like that. You know, do you pull in outside speakers or experts in these areas? And you allow them to speak and then foster discussion amongst the community if you think that is the role of the school. Because I don't know that you want the school to look like the one that's bringing this together, and it's a potential powder keg. Right?
Yeah, like you can.
Is that the appropriate role? So I just think that's something more that needs to be considered. An answer, not a recommendation one way or another.
I think the
But that's
reason,
something that should be considered.
the reason it's so relevant is because, you know, today's current events are, you know, history bleeding continually. Like, it's just one story, you know, that continues on. So to isolate, I mean, no one's unaware of how tricky it is to navigate different political views in 2021. So to politicize an elementary school, yes, is the wrong answer.
That's the, yeah,
But
that's the concern.
to ignore, you know, falling rubble down the street is ignorant and not beneficial for anyone.
So that's what I'm saying. Yeah, we have to consider how it is to be done and what the appropriate role is.
But I just think that if we had this conversation in 2019, maybe it would have been slightly, we all would be able to just agree that social responsibility, I mean, is generally a good concept. I mean, I don't think that any of us are that far off on that. Social responsibility shouldn't be stigmatized. I mean, we're talking about growing
Good
children
students,
who are willing to participate in their community and take care of one another.
Look at the mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that,
But we have to recognize too, the environment that we're in. And so what's the role? What I'm saying is, what is our role in this? Obviously, the role is to educate the children. But if we're talking about, you know, hosting town hall, have discussions on this, part about it,
Mm-hmm.
let's be wise.
yeah, I think it's safer is any conversation safer online? I think that it is a better idea to pose it out there on Thought Exchange and see what words are really, you know, really triggered in the conversation, what's recurring. Just to have a general idea, not to put you on the spot, Jason, and say you need to write a thesis on what social responsibility means to the community at Milburn, because I don't know if that's the best use of your time.
You know, and the community might take it a completely different way than you guys are. They might just,
True.
you know, I read it as action. So what sort of actions can we have our students take to improve our community?
But that's not what that's saying.
Investigate opportunities
To make
to be
our
more
field
socially responsible.
curricula more socially responsible. We're trying to define a curricula that is ensures social responsibility.
And curricula can be actions as well as,
It could be the assignment to do something, yeah.
so, you know.
But it's different. What I'm hearing from you, it sounds more like, okay, let's go out and do some community involvement and help the community. That's good, but to me, that's not investigating opportunities to make the curriculum more socially responsible. It's contributing, which is consistent with the mission, right?
I read it as kind of what Jason had said earlier. If you're analyzing or looking at curricula to put in place to make sure that that is socially responsible, then, you know, coming from like a teacher background, you have to have every group represented, you have to have it put out in a pretty plain way, you have to have data behind it. you have to make sure there's not much of a slant to any of it. And I mean, in reality, we're talking about education. There's a slant to everything. It really tends.
By the way, this is exactly how we got here, what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is when we were talking about the curriculum, we took it home, looked at it, and, you know, one of the statements made by someone who was on the board is that I was surprised at how far they went out of their way to not
Yeah.
have a slant. And
Yeah.
I looked
yeah.
at it and said, absolutely was a slant.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
It's
think
difficult.
that's part of it. It's very, very difficult. And I don't hear a lot of discourse in the public with people speaking moderately and inviting, let's look at both sides.
But yeah, no, that doesn't.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
It's not happening. And to me, I don't know, to make it more socially responsible would be to encourage kids, let's look at both sides. If this happens, this will happen. How are communities affected? How are individuals affected? What's the potential outcome? But these are big things. Big things, one, for elementary kids to grasp, but I think it's important. I encourage us to tread lightly, and let's be very rational and consider the outcome here.
And I think as long as we are all open about it as well. You know, we'll have dissenting opinions on things, but we're all adults. That's okay. That's the purpose of discussion.
If I could interject, please, gentlemen. I think what this is boiling down to is stick with the education, be very mindful of indoctrination. And although there's been very little of that I can find through the last 3 or 4 years, there are some instances of it. And one of those would be, there is no need for our kids to know what the political leanings of our teachers are. And yet in some of the classes that has snuck in. So looking at this at a high level, if it's education, stay on that path. If it starts to move off of that path into indoctrination, consider that the third rail and stay far away from it. I've got a feeling there's going to be more people watching in the next couple of years. That's my suggestion to the board.
I hope they do more than watch and participate, maybe run for board, so we don't have a. Seriously, I mean, if people.
If I can answer Brendan's question, sometimes being on the board handcuffs people, and not being on the board actually gives a little bit of freedom when it comes to certain things.
That's fine, and we have public participation time every day, so I encourage anybody who has any questions about the goings on or wants to have their opinion to share them.
I was simply answering your remark, Brendan.
Hey, Jason, I have a question for you. So, to what degree is there kind of like a standardized curriculum that's provided at the state level or at federal level? I'm not sure. For not just social studies, but across all the different subjects. So, like, how much of this is kind of like standard what the state would recommend that you teach, and like, are we playing at the edges here, like, an extra 5-10% specifically on social responsibility, but the overwhelming majority is what the majority of the kids across the state are learning? Or is it very district dependent?
I'll try to answer your question. Historically, local districts historically have had significant control over what's being taught in schools and curriculum. But that has changed over the past probably several decades, actually, but it's getting more and more tighter as to what is being required. If you had a chance, or if you do have a chance to read through the legislation that's been proposed for this year that I sent out today, and if you look under, one of them was curriculum and special ed, and there are many laws that are being proposed this year on specifics on what to teach and how to teach kids, and they're so it's changing as we speak, as far as that goes and the control that we have. Now there's certain things that we have to hit, like we have to teach about genocide. So we have to have a genocide unit. We have to have specifically a women's suffrage unit. There's certain units that we have to teach on, but it doesn't say how you have to present that information at this point. It doesn't give a whole lot of structure to that. It just gives topics basically on what you have to teach and how often. So within that framework, we have still have a lot of flexibility, but every legislative session there's less and less. Does that help answer your question?
It does. Yes, thank you.
And I think part of what I think you're saying too, Jose, is that the socially responsibility piece is not necessarily a subject, it's more of a behavior and values and norms and how we operate as people. So when we're talking about culture and the culture of our district and the culture that individuals bring into our district and how we agree to interact, that I think is a bigger conversation and a tougher conversation. So this now you can see why I've been kind of spinning my wheels on how to even get started on this, because are we talking about specific content? Are we talking about materials? Or are we talking about ideas that we teach? Are we talking about behaviors and how we interact with each other and those kinds of social responsibilities? So, and all of you are bringing up excellent points. I really appreciate this discussion, because I don't believe we've ever had this as a board in my tenure, starting to talk about this and even getting this much in depth. So it's a good conversation to have. I just don't know what part of my struggle is. What am I going to focus on? This is helping. This is helping me a lot, and I'm glad I'm not the only one that's trying to figure this out. You know, defining what is socially responsible or what's a socially responsible student, I think might be a great start. Or, hey, what do we want a student to leave here with as an 8th grader? Any of our students? And when we have that conversation, what's important, and if we bring all membership of our community that's diverse to the table to have that discussion, and every voice is heard, and we get to what's important and what we all can agree on, I think there's a lot of commonality, more than there is not at this point, even though we're super polarized and there's a lot of hot button words that we can throw out there that are misunderstood at times. I think I firmly believe there's still more common what we want our kids to experience and how we want them to leave here than there is uncommon. Another thought that I just had was, we talked, someone mentioned information literacy, how do we teach the kids on how to understand what's a good resource. Bias is good. To have bias training for our teachers and ourselves, because we can see bias as we're talking about the curriculum. Depending on my point of view, I can pick out bias of other people's point of view real quick. And they can pick out bias of my point of view. know this with my own, because you can just say one word, and I'm sitting there going, I know who you've been listening to on the radio, despite the words that are coming out of your mouth, so.
I mean, I think you bring up a really good point, Jason. Like, I feel part of me thinks that, you know, there's a ton of value in teaching not just children, anyone, really how to think versus what to think, right? So it's a lot more into, you know, even showing the fact that there's bias that exists everywhere, and, you know, how to be a discerning person, how to research both sides, really to find a middle, right? Like this type of stuff, it's not teaching about any particular movement or any particular, you know, current, like, you know, active social issue, but it's really thinking, like, you know, it's critical thinking skills, right? And allowing people to continue their learning and discerning what maybe propaganda, what might be misinformation, and what's, you know, truth. So that's an important component.
Yeah, I think so. And the role, you know, Sean, I think you were, what is our responsibility as a school district? Because I hear, the messages that I hear from community, in our own community, the more global community, from reading different articles, is the schools are having a whole lot of responsibility to shape the culture and to teach kids in how to behave. This is
Always.
it's always been that way, right? So parents, the parents are the number one influence on their kids, no matter what, good, bad, or indifferent. It's really tough to overcome that. But second to that is basically a lot of time in school. So, but where does that end as far as be very careful, as Jim said about indoctrination? We do not want to take the place of parents as far as indoctrination into religions or political beliefs. That's not what we're shooting for. That's not okay in a public school, and we have to be careful about that. Recognizing our own teachers and educators and leaders, it's complicated. We could go a lot of different directions here. I don't feel like I've addressed this enough this year, and now I'm reaffirming why I'm struggling with it so much. And I should have brought it to the board earlier, because I appreciate this conversation.
Did you have anything else going? Just
A little bit.
I mean, excuses.
Something distracted you from this?
If you accept that as an excuse, you'll always be.
So just kind of an abstract thought, but this National Geo curriculum is just for the middle school, right?
Yes.
Is there a way to just gauge the student body population, feel like a short essay, and see what this concept means to them?
Oh, maybe.
See where they are right now?
The kids?
Yeah, the kids.
Yeah.
I would think this would be more of a middle school, cognitively they'd approach
Right, an
that.
essay on what social responsibility
Yeah.
means.
Right.
The winner gets
Sorry,
100
kids.
bucks.
100
Sorry,
bucks.
kids.
Who's?
One more thing.
I don't know about that.
Best composition wins 100 bucks. Compliments of the school board.
The winner gets to ride in the front of the women's best parade. I'll figure it out.
Okay, well,
How many teachers are there teaching social studies in the middle school?
3.
3. Is this a conversation you've had with any of them, or all of them?
Not, yes, but haven't taken it any further than this.
That's hard. Like, as a teacher, I teach at the high school level. I work very hard at presenting both sides, like Sean was saying, like Jose mentioned, and like Jim mentioned. we are about producing critical thinkers. Here's what's out there. You're going to form your own thoughts. And I mean, that's a different level. It's higher up. But realizing, all right, well, I bring my own background. I bring my own experiences. All right, so what do I have to filter? Because it's not my job. They shouldn't know my political stance. They shouldn't know my, religious views or these types of things. So I think if we can focus on that, that would certainly help. Critical thinking, stay away from the indoctrination. It sounds like I didn't get a chance, or I think you guys did the curriculum before I came aboard. Vetting that, making sure that's decent, or it has both sides. I think that's all pointed in the right direction. Get student input, get community input. Sounds like a starting place.
I can tell you that I've had those conversations with teachers about non-indoctrination and don't share your political views, and they say we don't. I asked my boys what the political affiliation was of each teacher. They know.
Yeah.
We don't even, we're so blind to our own biases as people. It just comes out naturally. And like I said, other people can see it.
Yeah.
If you spend enough time with, and our kids spend a lot of time with the teacher, it's going to come out. Just the little comments here and there of what people think. And there's a few that they didn't know about. They nailed it pretty much.
An A for inferencing.
We teach that in school, don't we? All right. Excellent conversation.
So that was slide 3.
Great.
Back up.
Could be an all-nighter.
I'm sorry. This is our next point under the goal of unique opportunities inherent in our learning environment to encourage students to problem solve, negotiate, and self-advocate. We have done restorative practices, which I've talked about this year, started that a little bit, and second steps, and we have other curricula too that teach critical thinking, problem solving that we work with, and it's just naturally happening, I think, with our kids. Provide parents with curriculum expectations that are developed by trimester or quarter throughout the year in every major subject area, and report to the board periodically. So, haven't done as well as I would have liked on this, or gotten as far either as far as reporting to the board, but the elementary school's been working really hard. Middle school has 2, but we haven't gotten it down into 2 specifics as far as an outward facing parent. So I'm going to let Ben share a little bit about what's happening at elementary.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I just want to spend a brief moment just letting you know, as Jason mentioned, we've had a lot of support for our teachers with our instructional coaches. Pretty much that's our embedded support and PD that we have ongoing throughout the year for our teachers. But we knew we needed to have some facilitation and guidance as we walked into this school year with mapping out what our standards that we were going to identify as our priority, and also coming up with ways with assessing those standards. And so we started working with the Regional Office of Education before the school year began, connected with 2 individuals, Nicole Stroop and Lauren Lipsey. Both of them work for the Lake County Regional Office of Education. Nicole is more the ELA aspect of things, and Lauren's more the math aspect. And so we kind of set off our plan of how we can map out the school year. And it wasn't necessarily like we're going to get all the mapping done out at the very beginning. This was going to be ongoing and pretty much developing this in real time. But our goal was, let's identify those standards and also come up with plans of how we're going to assess our students so that we know that they're getting to that proficient or mastery level with these standards. So this is kind of a quick timeline of what we've done this year when it comes to PD, working with the ROE, both within ELA and math. Now, also keep in mind that math, we continue to use My Math, which has been our math resource curriculum for the last number of years. So we didn't spend a lot of time, as much time as ELA, because ELA, this is only our second year with ARC Core. Last year was our first year, and that was getting our teachers' feet wet with knowing what to expect when it comes to how the curriculum was laid out. And then all of a sudden, as we started in a rhythm of things, COVID hit and we weren't able to finish it off. So we're still fairly new when it comes to art course. So we knew we needed to spend a little bit more time with mapping that out and making sure we were addressing the essential standards that we wanted to. So this is kind of gives you the timeline of what we've done with the ROE when it comes to math and reading. So we knew we needed to develop some products with that. And pretty much these are our curriculum guides that we developed this year. So on the next slide, Jason, if you can go to the next one, this is kind of some of the examples of what we've created. So in the middle is pretty much our identified priority standards within math by grade level and separated by trimester. So this is something that actually we developed a few years ago, and it's actually on our website. But something that we took that as kind of our guide when it came to math this year, and making sure that, all right, what's our assessment plans? What do we need to tweak? And so that was kind of nice that we kind of did that legwork ahead of time. For ELA, we didn't have that. And so that's where we spend a little bit more time on. And so the two outside resources, you can see there's a Unit 2 example and a Unit 3 on the right side, which is, this is our guide that we created with the help of the ROE. And they pretty much walked us through what do we want to accomplish with our students this year? How do we want to do some ongoing assessment that we know that they're going down the right path? And that's our formative assessment plan. And then once we get to the end of those units, let's develop those summative assessments. So we know this is what we wanted to get them to produce for us after going through these units of study within our ELA program. And so we spent a lot of time doing that. Teachers did a great job working with the ROE. Once they gave us that guidance, then Ms. Lawrence, our instructional coach, she did the work with facilitating times throughout the entire year to work with teachers, making sure that we had our paths in the right direction when it comes to where we want the students to be at the end of each unit. So so this kind of gives you a quick glimpse of what we've done this year. And again, I cannot give enough kudos to our staff with working hard with what we had to deal with this year, with making sure that at least we've identified the standards that we want the kids to master. And I think the kids have done a great job with doing that this year. So a little bit of a nutshell of what we did this year when it comes to some curriculum tweaking with COVID.
Thanks, Ben.
I have a feeling I'm next.
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
All right, sounds good. So some of the professional development at MMS, you'll see some parallels with what Jason mentioned earlier in the year with some technology things, what Ben had shared also about the regional office standards and things like that. So in August, we met with the regional office, and the different subjects worked on essential standards and some sequencing just to kind of prioritize some of those standards. Social studies, as you guys know, and we talked about a lot about the National Geographic series that was adopted at the beginning, at the end of last year for this year. And there's been 3 training sessions or 2 training sessions in August and a February training session with National Geographic on that new curriculum, as well as several from last year. I just highlighted the ones from this year. And that was, you know, largely like just getting it off the ground. It's it's heavily weighted in technology. And so there was a lot of training for the staff members to get students on to use that new curriculum. We also embedded some focused on some department team time. So we had embedded into the in-service days a lot of our team time to get our 3 social studies teachers some time to connect with each other in purposeful and meaningful ways, along with like all the disciplines. So science had time together, ELA had time together, math had time together, et cetera. So specials teams and PE teachers also work together as well. And then Apple training, Jason had mentioned that in the beginning, focusing on using technology to engage students and in both in person as well as in the remote setting, so that blended hybrid learning. One of those was Nearpod training that the team leaders had shared with me was really impactful for them, and that was a lesson delivery tool that they were using, and they got the training to implement that.
Cool. Any questions for Jake or Ben on that stuff before we move on? So going back to our goals, our overall goal was professional development, basically professional development for the staff and looking at our curriculum and mapping that out for parents, so. We did a lot of training this year on tech and of course, and standards. We did a lot of work with the ROE on standards on what is it that we really need to get to this year because we knew it was gonna be a tough, short school year.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jason, Jake, and Ben. Great job. Moving on to our remote learning update.
Well, we have 34 days left of school for in-person learning and remote learning, so we're kind of status quo again until the end of the year. Things are going relatively well. We have had more classroom closures in the last week or so at the elementary building especially. So a lot of relocations and kids coming to school with symptoms. But so far, none of those classrooms that we've had to move this year that we've sent a student home with symptoms, so far none of them have had COVID. They've had symptoms related to allergies or upset stomach or something else. So
And we have one today? Or was that yesterday?
Classroom moving?
No, I thought I saw we had one.
Oh, we had a
finally
COVID.
had one case.
We had a COVID case, but it wasn't somebody that we sent home. It's the kids. Usually when we have positive cases of kids, which we've had many of them,
Yeah.
lots of them, but they don't come to school that day. So they're usually sick, they stay home, they go get tested and positive.
Okay.
So parents are doing a good job generally of keeping their kids home, usually.
And then if there's no one else in the pod with symptoms, then everything carries on.
Everything carries on.
Okay.
Yep, we just watch and send a letter home that says there was a student in the class, had no, because of the way our classes are set up, in most of our classes, there's no one within 6 feet of that student with their mask off, so no one else should be a close contact.
Yeah.
How are our teachers doing?
Good. They're tired. They're working hard, they're grinding through the year, but I really appreciate their efforts, for sure.
They're mostly vaccinated now, right?
90%.
90% with both doses?
Yep.
Wow.
And so there's a few people who are, have health conditions or hesitancy, but, and slowly even some of those are getting vaccinated now, so we're getting closer.
Sorry, it sounded a bit muffled. Did you say that 90% of the teachers have been vaccinated at this point?
Correct, with both doses.
That's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Thank you to Round Lake High School for
Hey,
hosting
you're
us.
here.
Yes. Great job. That's it for the remote learning update, President.
Let's take a look at our school board meeting dates for next year.
These are, we can't approve these until the next meeting.
Yep.
But this is for your information. So if you have questions or suggestions, let me know or let Veronica know.
Is the next meeting the swearing in of the?
Yep. So the next meeting is the seating meeting where we have to say goodbye to Denise and Jim. And then we welcome on Vanessa Boss and John Lorenz.
All right, so check your calendars. I know you've all got a plan a year ahead. Financial projections and presentation. I'm assuming that's Dr. Jones.
It is Dr. Jones. I'm gonna present, and Dr. Johns can direct me, but we've done a budget, not we, Dr. Johns has done a budget projection.
No, you sat with me.
Right, so if it's good and you like it, I did it. If it doesn't balance, Dr. Johns did it, but, no, we worked on it a little bit together, and Dr. Johns did the, most of the work and put it together in a spreadsheet. There's some different slides that we haven't shown before in the past that you're gonna see, just to give a little bit of context and background information, so we'll see what you think about that. I'm gonna set this up with sharing that screen so that everybody can see. Then I'm gonna play it. And I'm so used to slides now, going back to PowerPoint is. Hold on.
We're going to the next screen. Okay, now, in some of the data that I've got in these slides basically includes the districts listed there. I could have chosen other districts as well, but I chose some elementary districts in Lake County. So we have some of the more wealthy districts as well as some of the districts that are not as wealthy. So there is basically Antioch, Cannons, Grass Lake, Grace Lake, Gurnee, 56, Lake Villa, Libertyville, Melbourne, Oak Grove, and Woodland are the districts that are listed. And the size of the dot shows you basically the size of the district. We're the red dot up there, I believe. I think that's us.
Right there, yeah. This is Woodland. There's like Libertyville, Oak Grove, Gurnee, 56.
Okay.
And some of this is a function of fixed cost too, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
And
this actually shows you the operating expenditures per pupil.
Yep. So when you're looking at operating expenditures per pupil, in the past, we were more comparable with Antioch. We used to battle it out. Due to our enrollment dropping over the past significantly, your per pupil, if you have expenses the same and less kids, your calculation is gonna be different. So we're not, what this is showing is that we're not operating at the highest efficiency for buildings and operations at this point.
Yeah, part of it, we basically overall kind of maintained the same staffing level, but reduced the students. When Jason and I first started, him as superintendent, me as business manager, we were, I think, a little over 1,500 or just under 1,500 students. Now, I think the last number that I saw was like 1,163, 1,160 somewhere. We've lost a significant number of students, but yet we've been able to maintain the same staff ratios. And the most expensive part of running a school district is salaries and benefits. So, and we'll get a little bit later into what's kind of happened as we've gone through and why we're able to still continue doing that. Now, this next slide shows special ed students are low-income students, and the special ed is red. So for whatever reason, there was a fairly significant increase in special ed students from 2019 to 2020.
Dr. Johns, I'm wondering where this is picking this up, and I'm guessing it's because we house CETO in our building that.
I wondered, at the very last slide, it has where the data came from.
Right.
So I kind of wondered the same thing, unless it has to do with, students that have moved into the district.
No.
Okay. But
No.
see, didn't we start housing CETO in like 2018, or was it 2019 when we had the largest group that came in?
2019.
Okay. So they're probably using
Last year was our first year with more.
they're probably using the fall housing.
Right.
And so depending on which one, whether they use all the students that we house, or they use the students that are our students, then that makes a difference in where that is.
Right. So we don't have, I'm only saying that we haven't had a huge influx of special education students at Melbourne, other than ones we're housing classrooms for. So there's no this isn't some sort of weird anomaly, it's just the way the data's been picked up. We're still around.
I kind of assumed that, but
So, sorry, just for my edification, what happened in between 2017 and 2018 in regards to low income? Was it like a redefinition of what low income meant?
well, what happened at that point is the state changed their definition, their
Okay.
process for direct certification. So there were some students that previously were not, and basically with direct certification, they're matching with Medicaid and some of the other programs for low-income families and matching those students. And so between 2017 and 18, they changed that process and they included additional students and allowed them to be eligible for free and reduced. So they kind of changed their guidelines. So that's why we saw that huge spike in low income, which also equates to our free and reduced population. So
Got it. Thank you. And
yeah.
Sorry, I just also wanted to ask, what does ELL, ELP mean, or LEP?
English language learners and
Limited English proficiency.
And that's one that I think is relatively accurate. You know, when I first came here, and that was back to 2014, we had a fairly small population of English language learners or limited English proficient. And now it's showing that we went from around 2% up to a little over 6%. And that's one of those positions that we had actually added for this school year. But then because of the pandemic, we actually didn't fill that position, and then we added a position, or basically for this year kind of replaced that position because we needed another regular ed teacher to be able to do both the remote and the in-person learning. But that does kind of give you some justification, because basically our numbers of students has about tripled in the period from 2014 to 2020. So we do have a lot more need for assistance for those students.
Yep. Okay, this graph is showing our overall health of the district over time. This is our fund balances from when we started. This drop wasn't, we didn't, the bottom didn't fall out this particular year. It might have been a slight dip from 11 or 10 to 11. But what happened is the state switched, and our auditor switched from.
No, the state didn't switch, the auditor.
The auditor switched from a cash basis accounting to an accrual basis. So when you take your accrual accounting, all of our spring tax revenue that we get is pushed into the next year, so that fund balance then drops out.
So basically, in our case, it made about a $5 million difference.
Yeah. But nonetheless, it shows that we were in big trouble in these areas because we had a negative fund balance to start the school year. This is starting the school year, in this case, minus $5.6 million, and then we've been working our way towards zero and then above in the last 4 years. And now we're holding steady on that line, and we'll see that too.
Oh, it has 3 minutes left.
Okay. The other thing that happened.
I'll take a look.
Between 2010 and 2013, the district lost about a third.
What?
Staff from 2010.
Then it
to
was
2000
start, like it wasn't fully.
because of-
They opened it, I closed it. It said on, and then it counted.
I'm sorry, because of what?
Because of, the board made reductions in staff.
Oh,
We did
okay.
risks.
Yeah.
So in that 3 or 4 year period, and you know, I'm not sure, it may have started prior to that, we lost about a third of our staff. And that's just people, not necessarily teachers. It was teachers, paraprofessionals, the whole cadre of people.
What was a third of our teachers?
Yeah.
Was it? Okay. I just remember 1/3 in my head.
We went from 150 to 100 over a 4 year period.
And then in April 2013, we passed a property tax referendum for the operating fund. And that's the only reason that we were able to maintain our staffing levels, because that gave us about $950,000 a year in additional revenue to support the budget. And that was a long process. Just prior to Jason and I taking over as superintendent and business manager, was it just one failed referendum, or had they had more than one?
Just one.
Just one.
Yep.
So then we spent 2 or 3 years working on providing information to the public, being more transparent and making people understand where we were financially, and then went back and it did pass, but it was a close vote.
Yep.
But that, like I said, that gave us about $950,000. That became part of our base, that then each year the increase is based on that total base that includes that extra 950. Okay, move to the next one. This kind of gives you an idea of the operating expenses per pupil, and that's kind of was on one of those earlier slides. So it just basically, because we've reduced in numbers of students, our operating expense per pupil has gone up because we've kept our staffing level pretty close to the same. I mean, it might be off by half a person to, 1 or 2 people, but we bounced between 98 and 102, 103 in the last 10 years. Okay, go ahead and flip to the next one. You can go to the next one.
Oh, you don't want to talk about this?
Oh, no, okay, I'm sorry. No, I missed it. Yeah, we do. This is, I thought you were still on the one before. This basically shows, with those districts that I listed there, where we are in average teacher salary. And I can almost say with certainty that we probably were close to the bottom 10 years ago.
I want to say, take when we talk about average teacher salary, that's kind of a dangerous game to play, because we don't know where people are at on their career ladder, and every district has a different compensation pathway.
Yeah.
Woodland, their average teacher salary is here, but their starting salary is almost the lowest in the county. So either they have a bunch of people close to retirement on the retirement track, which Milburn does. We have 20% of our teachers are in the retirement track now. Or maybe Emmons has new teachers, and this is such a small sample size, a couple of teachers could make a big difference. So I just want to, it's good information, it's accurate information, but when we're talking averages, there's more to this story. So I'm always careful about how we look at it. It's APs.
Where do we fall with average starting?
Middle
In general, or
Middle of
of
the whole
business?
county. So it'd be in the
So not
middle.
just these, but all the elementary districts.
We'd be above Woodland, we'd be behind Libertyville, behind Oak Grove. Yeah, it's about the same, except for Woodland. Woodland would be toward the bottom. Gurney 56 might be a little higher than us. And the rest would be lower for starting. Good question. Okay, good with that?
Yeah. Okay, now this is the one that typically we've shown you, not giving you a lot of background information. Basically, this shows historical from 2016 through 2020, where we were. You can see in 2019 we had a slight drop, and that was because we transferred dollars into capital projects. For some of the projects, we did the STEM lab in 2019, and we did quite a bit of life safety work, but that was funded through the Life Safety Fund. So that basically dealt with monies transferred when we did the STEM lab. 2021 is where we're at now, and it's still one of those that is still a moving target, just where we're going to end up this year, just because of all the adjustments we've had to make due to the pandemic. Overall, our supply costs have gone down, but our benefit costs have gone up. Some of that is due to the fact that we've had, staff members whose spouses may have lost their jobs or lost their insurance. And so all of a sudden now they're taking family insurance. The other thing that went up was our purchase services, which also includes our software. And I think we've added roughly, with the pandemic and the remote learning, about $100,000 worth of additional software costs this year. So hopefully some of those in the next couple of years can drop off. There's another SOFA, which is another thing that Jason and the tech team are working on, is kind of analyzing all of our software and looking at that. And so that's, hopefully we'll be able to have some savings there. But who knows?
No.
It doesn't ever seem to work that way.
Well, it's an expensive.
Yeah, that was what, $8,000 for the software to do the analyzing?
Right, and I've got probably 40 hours into it already, and probably another couple hundred to go before July 1st. So those are costs that the district doesn't see, that doesn't show up directly on a spreadsheet. Plus time with other staff, that's not included. So SOPA is the Student Online Privacy Act. I think I might have mentioned that. Huge unfunded mandate, massive, I think, long term.
The only positive I see in that is it's forced the companies that provide services to us to pony up and accept responsibility for protecting our data.
Yep.
Because before, every contract I saw, they pretty much wrote it so that we were responsible for everything, even if they screwed up or one of their vendors screwed up. So that's the one positive I've seen out of it.
Right.
But I haven't actually been directly involved with the amount of time Jason spent on it. So basically, what this one does is looking at leaving staffing levels pretty much the same for FY22. Looking at, I think I put in a reduction of 1 staff member in FY23 and 2 staff members in FY24. And we're hoping that as we have, if we continue with our declining enrollment, then hopefully it won't, have a huge impact.
Right.
Part of the problem, though, too, is when you have smaller numbers of students, the grade levels don't always work out where you can cut somebody without having one grade level get an impact as far as students per teacher versus another. But that's kind of where we're at. This is, we're kind of getting to the point that referendum money is pretty much, it's helped us get to where we're at, but now we're going to have to start looking at being very careful with our dollars and prioritizing how we spend our money, looking at our staffing levels and making adjustments in order to move forward and maintain positive cash balances. It does also include, I did do the calculations for the retiree savings for FY22 through 2025.
Dr. Johns, I have a quick question for you. So these projections, were they based, actually, sorry, let me rephrase the question. With COVID, we've seen that there's been a fairly significant influx into the suburbs, right? I don't know to what degree that's happened in our area of the district or of the state, but are we seeing or expecting a larger influx of families with small children in our district, and does that affect these projections at all?
It may. One of the things that I have been seeing is, as property values have risen, we're seeing a lot more homes turnover. Previously, back in 2007, 2008, in that area right before the crash, we saw lots of people who were moving out whose kids were out of high school, and then new families purchasing those homes that had young children. And at that time, we also had lots of subdivisions going in. The only subdivision we have at this point is, I can't think of the name of it, it's a senior, Briargate, which is a senior housing, which is on Route 45, near where the Lindenhurst Health Club used to be.
Yeah.
it's just north of Grand Avenue. And so I can say that probably a month ago, we had kind of, through the grapevine, a report of that approximately 10 of those homes in there had sold, which they're in the probably $250,000 to $400,000 range. So I think that will help, and so I did put in, starting in '22, some additional new construction. I think I put $1 million for '22 and '23 and $500,000 for '24. I know that the rate that those homes are being purchased is much higher than any of us anticipated. We were thinking they might, sell maybe 3 to 5 homes a year as they're building it out, just because of the economy, et cetera. But all of those homes are ranch homes, so they're single level. So for somebody who's a senior who wants to have all of things taken care of, it is a nice place, and they can still stay in the community. So in those cases, we won't get students there.
Yeah, so that's on the revenue side, but I'm speaking in regards to the number of students, right? Like I'll speak to my neighborhood, right? This is right across the street from Briargate. We're seeing the transition over from those families who bought 20 years ago. The kids are no longer there. The parents are now older and they're moving out, and we're seeing an increase in younger families, right, with kids that are going to be in elementary school and middle school. So are we expecting an influx or a higher level of students over the next few years, given those families moving into the suburbs?
I think we'll have a better idea of that once we get into next year, because it's only been in the last 6 or 8 months, when property values have escalated, that a lot of that, or maybe you've seen it sooner, but when I look historically, the numbers of students that we're losing has been decreasing over the last 2 or 3 years. There was a period about 4 or 5 years ago where we were losing about 50 students a year. Now we're, not losing that many students every year. I don't know, Jason, do you have any comments on that?
Oh, yeah, we've been flat, actually, in our enrollment. So,
Okay.
yeah, Jose, we're seeing the same trends. And actually, when we did, when Dr. Johns and I did enrollment projections probably 10 years ago, we had projected a greater decrease than what we're seeing now. We should be, if those trends had continued, we were looking at less than 1,000 kids in our school right now, and we're at 1,100. So we've already been seeing that as houses turn over, when they do sell, young families are moving in, because that's the only attraction, not the only attraction, but it's the major attraction of our school district is the schools. And people want excellent schools, and with young families, otherwise, why pay the taxes and why pay the extra money to buy a house in this school district? So yes, that is definitely a trend. I don't see an influx necessarily any greater than we have in the last few years. In fact, I'd say it's doing is helping us stay steady instead of seeing a further decline, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Okay.
For example, Jose, when I'm looking around the room here, for those of us that live in the district, well, we all live in the district except Steve, but and Veronica, but with kids in the district, our kids are gonna be in high school soon, but we're still gonna be living in our house. So until we sell it, you're not gonna see a huge influx like we used to see when a subdivision would put in 100 homes a year. That's when we saw huge, massive growth that was hard to keep up with.
I think your first graph showed it. Your first graph showed that it looked like last year it went up a little bit, total population, student population. That graph, next graph.
Oh, yeah, it has enrollment. That one has
So right
enrollment
there,
as well.
see the graph?
Yeah.
Oh, this one.
The bar, yeah.
Yeah, so we've been basically the last 4 years holding steady right in here, right under 1,200, between 11 and 12. 1150, I think, was this year.
And in that one, probably part of that 2020 though is Seagull as well.
It could be Cedar.
Yeah, because that's a little over 1,200, or right at about 1,200.
And we're at 11.
And we have about 60 CEDOL students in the district.
Right.
Well, 5 years, you'll have all the COVID babies coming in, so.
Yeah. I don't think there are that many COVID cases. There was no COVID boom.
So I guess the long and short of it though is probably the next few years are gonna be very tight. And just to make everybody aware of that, you know, we're gonna have to be very careful about how we spend our money and know that there may be some slight fluctuations. And typically when we do this 5-year projection, usually going out about 2 or 3 years is about as far as you can get and be relatively accurate because it's projection upon projection upon projection. And the further you try to go out, the you know, the wider that gap becomes as far as being accurate. But it always helps to look there because then you can kind of see that. And then that's part of why we do this every year too, to try and look at where you're at. But like I said, this year was very difficult to do just because where we actually set the budget and where we've actually spent our dollars are in all sorts of different places just because of COVID and the type of teaching and et cetera that we've had to do. Anybody have any additional questions?
I don't think that,
And I can save this as a PDF and then we can post it on the website and then I can email it to all of you as well.
Dr. Johnson,
Mhm.
did you have a low cash balance?
Those are the 2 slides you told me to take out.
No, was it really?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
yeah, that's what they were, and you said you don't need them, so I pulled them out.
That was not what I thought they were, so.
That's what they were.
'Cause I like that one.
Can you just include it when you post them out on the,
Yeah, I can do that.
sure.
Yeah, basically, it wasn't the one that showed the dollars, it was more of a graph format. So
I can pull it.
okay. I wondered why you wanted me to pull those out, because you specifically asked for that.
No, I didn't.
It's like the third or fourth slide from the back. Okay. So in this one, the green is the cash balance.
Hang on, Dr. Johnson.
Okay,
sure.
The folks out on the,
Oh, okay, they can't see it yet.
interweb can't see anything yet. What I need to do. Download this. And drop it there. There we go.
It's almost like the third or fourth slide from the end. Okay. They can see now, right?
Yep.
Okay. So basically, this is out of similar software, but a little bit different in that this uses past history to do the projections, and then I can go in and make adjustments, which I haven't made a lot of adjustments as yet. So everything through February is actual, and from March through June is estimated based on how we got our revenue and expenses last year. And sometimes there could be cases like where we did a transfer last year that we aren't gonna do this year, or vice versa, where I'll need to go in and make an adjustment, but it does give you a general idea. So
The key point on this.
the key point is that, you know, you have your revenue and expenses, and basically in May and June are when we get the property taxes. So this is gonna be on a cash basis, not an accrual basis. So looking at somewhere around $7 to $8 million, cash balance at the end of the year. And that's why I think there's something in there that I'm gonna need to adjust between February and June, but, because it won't be that high, I don't believe. Probably closer to between that 6 and 7 million. We're not gonna see a huge increase, but we may see a slight increase because this is looking at several different funds. It's all the operating funds that we use in Forecast 5 or PMA. So the green shows the cash balance, what happens to it. So basically, you know, May is kind of that low point for the cash balance. And then it looks like either September or June are gonna be your high point. And the other thing you gotta remember too, that when we got our property taxes this year, people were allowed to make 4 payments, 2 payments in the spring and 2 payments in, you know, like June and August, and then it was September and November, I believe. And we didn't get our final property tax payments until we got 2 additional payments this month in April. Normally we've gotten all of our property tax money from the last levy by January, maybe February at the latest. So it's kind of shifted some of that revenue into a different ballpark. And then this one shows you month by month your revenue, which is the blue, and your monthly expenses. And then if you see the shadowing in the darker red, that's basically your revenue. So basically you have 2 revenue points that are high, you know, September and June. And then all of your other revenue kind of varies as you go through the year. The other piece that the June revenue, and I didn't spend a lot of time looking at that, but the state with the categorical payments, so some of the special ed payments, transportation, they tend to not pay those if they don't have enough cash. So all of a sudden we might get 2 or 3 payments in a couple month period that may be even money left over from the year before. So that's the other thing that, you know, I'll need to go through there and adjust for. But I did want to give you something that at least give you an idea as to the trending of what our revenue and expenses were. But like I said, through February, that is accurate, and within by the next board meeting, we should have through March. So I'll try and maybe look at those 2 again and see if I can do an update to get you there. But I know Carly's working on the March. She got the revenue in today, and then she's working on reconciling to make sure that there aren't any errors as she does the bank account reconciliation.
Okay.
Any other questions on future agenda items? Does anybody have any future agenda items?
Yeah, how about one, Brendan?
Sure, go ahead, Jim.
Can we find some money to fix that damn fan? No, I'm serious.
Is it
That's
that, or
bad.
No,
is it that, okay? Yeah, we can have somebody out here again to check on it. Because I shut down everything that I know to shut down, and that didn't seem to take care of the buzzing noise.
Okay, because if these Zoom meetings, you know, especially when the public's, you know, possibly going to be in on the calls, that background noise is bad. It's picking up pretty loudly.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
Okay.
even louder on your end than it is sitting here.
All right, thank you.
Superintendent's report.
Is it? nothing too new to report. I did attend, as I mentioned in my board notes on Friday, a couple of trainings last week. One was the Illinois State Superintendent's Association, and one was the leadership training. I'm really excited about the leadership training. It's really top-notch training, and we come out of this with a personal professional plan and a district professional plan. So really looking forward to that, and tying that into what we're trying to do as a district and how I can become an effective leader and leading the district, and hopefully that has a positive impact on kids and what we're doing here. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll keep the board informed as we go.
All right, back to Dr. Johns for the business people.
Okay. I'll try and just hit the highlights in here. The one that I do want to go to is the ESSER's grants. We have 2 of those that should I wait and have you find it? Okay. So I kind of gave you some indication as to how we're looking to fund the summer program. The ESSER's program, though, ESSER's $1 are all spent. The ESSER's 2 allocations, some of those have already kind of things that we've purchased. We can go back to March 17th or something, March 13th of 2020. So some of the things like the air cleaners we purchased, the sound field systems, some of the software that wasn't covered by another grant, we can charge those to this grant, and that will help us in our ed fund. But we also have some additional needs, and one of those needs is desks. Especially looking at lunch, the desks that we have in the district, the newest ones are 14 years old. And so looking at getting some items, some desks that are maybe a little more ergonomic, that once we're able to get students closer together, that you can kind of fit together and nest and allow groupings, et cetera, within the classroom. But in order to feed the students, we almost need to use desks in the cafeteria and probably one of the gymnasiums in order to get students 6 feet apart. Because when you have a table and you can only fit 2 or 3 kids on a lunchroom table, in that same space, you could have more desks 6 feet apart. So that's kind of what we're looking to do, but that cost is going to be fairly significant. We're looking at, depending on the type of desk that we end up with, $65,000 to $95,000. And just to also be aware that we're not the only district looking at this, so it's also very time sensitive, that unless we get our order in fairly quickly, we may not have the desks in time to start the school year. So, and that sounds really crazy, but in the time of COVID, every little thing that somebody comes up with, you know, really has a dramatic effect on that supply chain.
Quick question, when must the ESSER's grants funding be spent?
September 30th of 2023.
Okay.
So it's not something that we have to spend immediately. So I'm just kind of listing the items that we've identified as, you know, needs. Now the other area, and I just put a ballpark number on it as far as library tables and chairs. We had done some work looking at, you know, kind of reinventing the entire library. And that cost ranged from about $100,000 to $130,000 for a library to do the total renovation of the library. Part of what we're kind of looking to maybe hit on is just do a portion of that. So I'm looking at maybe, you know, spending up to like $50,000, looking at replacing some tables, some chairs. You know, maybe, and I know the media center people had kind of also looked at it. What if we took their plan and broke it into sections? And if you go up here, the 3 bullet points that make it an allowable expense is if you're addressing learning loss, you're preparing schools for reopening, you're testing, repairing, and upgrading projects to improve air quality in school buildings. So those are the 3 questions you ask. If you can somehow justify any of that, with the use of these funds, then it qualifies. And they actually even have an email address that if we're not sure, we can email and say, does this qualify? So desks, looking maybe at some library tables and seating. We have been talking for quite a while about the automation. We still have the older section of the building that we really don't have control over the HVAC units. They just kind of operate on their own. There's some things that we can do to control them, but not a lot. It also is running on a pneumatic system, so we've got an air compressor that sits in the room and runs 24/7. So we're actually on a replacement one that we thought we weren't going to have to use for very long because we didn't put a huge amount of money into it. But that's probably going to run about $75,000 to do that and make it all electronic, where we can go in and adjust temperatures and do all the things that we can everywhere else. I am working with the gas company, and then I'll also contact ComEd because they also have, and they don't call them rebate programs anymore, but where we can get some dollars based on what kind of cost savings that we're looking to generate as a result of automating that. And just the fact that you don't have that compressor running 24/7, and you just have a electronic control will save quite a bit of energy, plus the fact that it will allow us to control a little bit better how much air we're bringing into the building, air exchanges and those kind of things. The classroom projectors, we did write that into one of our Title IV grant, but the installation wasn't in there. We could use this for that installation. And then we've also talked about getting 1 or 2 tents. I can tell you that as of about 3 weeks ago, the tents had gone from being shipped. When I talked to them like a month or so ago, they were shipping like the beginning of May. And then like 2 or 3 weeks ago, they were talking about shipping now the beginning of June. So if that is something we want to do, we are going to need to take action fairly quickly on that. If we want a tent that has 3 sides and a 20 by 40, that's almost 12,700 or something. Plus in there is also a cost to have an installer come install it, and I haven't requested that quote yet. A tent, an outdoor tent, 20 feet by 40 feet. So at one point we were talking about maybe using that for lunch, but I think we've kind of talked ourselves out of that. But if you want to have a space where you can take a larger group into, other than a gymnasium, then that would be a spot you could do that. And typically you could use that in the fall, spring, and summer. It's kind of like what you see in a lot of some of the restaurants are putting up outside, that type of it's actually a commercial tent. And I'm kind of staying out of that. I'm just getting the information and then, letting everybody else look at whether that's the best use of the money.
Before we keep going, sorry, just one question in the list above. Sorry, can you scroll up to the previous list? The sound field systems for classrooms. I think I may have missed what that was. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, basically it's a microphone that the teacher wears. There's actually a speaker in the classroom, and it allows every student to hear the teacher. It's been especially helpful in classrooms since teachers are having to wear masks. They don't have to shout. They can talk in a normal voice. And just even I've experienced, I have to talk louder with the mask on for people to be able to hear me. So it basically makes sure that all the students are able to hear what's going on in the classroom. So if you have, and then it also connects to any of our students with hearing impairments that have an FM unit. It allows them to hear as well because it ties directly into those as well.
So that 21,500 covers every single classroom that we have?
Covers whatever we didn't have. Now, I don't know if we'll need additional when we come back, but I thought it did. I thought it covered everything, but I don't know.
No, we've already purchased them.
Yeah, we've already purchased them, but when we're back fully with 100% of our students, are we going to need more?
No.
Okay. So this takes care of it. Yep. But at the time we purchased those, we didn't have any grant funds available for us to use, so we just made that purchase. So all I'm saying is we can go back and use these funds to pay for that to help our bottom line.
Okay.
And we also purchased the air cleaners as well. And that was roughly.
How many units?
Oh, what did we buy?
$500 a piece.
Was it, I think roughly 500 apiece.
Is there in every classroom?
Not quite every classroom.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close now. We prioritized, at first we prioritized classrooms that were internal, that you can't open windows, smaller spaces, poor ventilation. Some classrooms, if they shared ventilation with another classroom, that would be a priority. Most of our classrooms have univents like this that is awful when it doesn't work, but this recirculates the air with this space if this is closed off in one classroom, so, which is nice for COVID. The other 60 years that this building's open, it's miserable, but,
Well,
for
you know,
this year,
it's
great.
nice for COVID, but it's also noisy.
They're noisy.
And so the sound field units also help kids who might be sitting by the univent be able to hear as well. And then if you scroll on down, I kind of listed some of those items, and this kind of gets back to, and I'll just let you read, for the sake of time, read what I sent out on the purchasing policy. But these are kind of, no, scroll back up. No, a little bit further. There. Things that are going to be over, currently our policy has, if there's any purchase over $10,000, we have to get board approval. One of the things that we've run into is some timing issues with a lot of these, that having to wait for that board approval, especially on things that are time sensitive, causes a delay in us getting those things, and actually hurts the instructional process. So that's one of the things that we're asking that you reconsider. I know when we first added that policy, the comment was that, well, you always tell us anyway, so why not have us vote on it? Well, part of what we've seen since 2017, when that went into effect, is, we have had areas where we've had a delay in getting things for students because of the fact that we have to either have a special meeting for the town meeting, or you're waiting 2 weeks, and if there's a, if it's the time of the year that everybody's ordering those, the longer you wait, the longer it is before you can get to put them in student hands or teacher hands to be used.
So is your recommendation to remove the threshold altogether?
Right. And the policy that is either that or change the dollar amount to something higher. But the policy as proposed that tonight does not include that. And it also doesn't include a provision that you have to, that for projects over $1 million, that you have to, the contractor has to participate in an apprenticeship program. And I also included some information from the attorney as far as areas where she felt that could cause us problems litigation-wise. And I can tell you, I've only been in one district that had a similar policy or provision. And in that district, it was not apprenticeship programs, but it had to be union. And so I had my custodial supervisor who bid the trash removal, and the company that it was awarded to ended up not being union. So then the district ended up having to pay liquidated damages to that company, plus then paying a contract for the union contractor that was next in line. So it is one of those things that it can cause problems. That's the only instance I've had, that was one district when I was there 6 years, and we only had one instance in that time period, but it is something that can be costly. And then I guess the question, and I've done over $350 million worth of school construction in my career, and I guess typically if you're in a larger project, you're going to get those union people that are going to be, union, and people that have apprenticeships that are going to be bidding. But realistically, I've never really seen where we've had somebody who wasn't competent and didn't do a good job. A lot of that has to do with how you supervise the job and what you're willing to accept or not accept, as far as the type of work that they do. But a part of it too is the architect also vets those contractors ahead of time. So, you know, it's not like you're, you know, once they get the bids in, you know, they actually do spend time meeting with them, making sure that they have the capability of doing the job, of doing the work in the timely fashion within the parameters set, et cetera. So,
Is that a standard in the industry at all, or in school districts, or to have this apprenticeship requirement?
no, it's not. It's something that there are 2 counties that have Lake County, and I don't know, there's another county that recently did that. And, you know, at the county level, they're probably large enough that they can get a wide pool of people who are gonna be applying to do work for them. But I did put an example in here, and I don't know what the price is gonna come in at yet, but like for our relocation of the fire department connection at the middle school, we contacted 7 sprinkler companies. Only one of them was willing to give us a price on relocating that. You know, they said, we don't do that work anymore. But I mean, we even got names of sprinkler companies from the architect, and Terry contacted 7 contractors, and we do have one coming next week to give us a quote. So, and who knows if they have an apprenticeship program or don't have an apprenticeship program, but it is something that, and granted, we were talking, when we were looking at that, we were talking larger projects, but it is something that we do periodically run into that we have difficulty finding. Now, they'll pay prevailing wage, they just may not be, their staff may not be an apprenticeship program.
How long ago did we implement that as a district?
Oh, we haven't implemented that. That was proposed back in October, was it, Jason?
I believe so, last fall sometime.
Yeah. So it was proposed, and that's why it's been on the agenda for us to look at policy 460.
Yeah.
And what's the, sorry, go ahead.
Well, if you read what I sent, it has all the language and everything in it. I sent a separate email. So
Yeah, I looked at that. I just did, I didn't understand or I guess I'd like to understand the rationale of the pros behind it, like what we think we would gain by implementing that type of program.
Well, I think what the intent behind that program is that we get qualified people to work on our buildings. So that is the intent behind it.
Yeah. And the presumption is that you'll get a better quality product as a result of having people in apprenticeship programs that are working on your project.
Yeah.
And like I said, in you know, my work of doing over $350 million worth of school construction, it's not so much who it is, but it you know, whether or not they have that. It's more along the lines of how you monitor the work and make sure that it's done to the specifications that it should be. So a lot of that is on the architect as well as the owner, which in this case would either be Jason or myself, and monitoring to make sure they do it correctly.
If I recall, we were pretty satisfied with that answer when we discussed it, weren't we? Like when you had gone over that last October, we were talking about the value of going union versus how often do non-unions outbid unions, what type of product, what the threshold were, you know, I think you explained it pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a question of, you know, whether that's something the board wants to step into. There basically was a resolution that was presented that would have also added additional things into the policy, which I know when the attorney looked at our documents that we use for bidding, the majority of those items were already in our bidding documents. So then it was almost a question of, do you really want to put that in a policy or in a resolution? Because then that limits your ability to change those if things change in the future and you need to make changes for those.
Yeah.
So basically, it's one of those that, you know, I can go with it either way as long as we're looking at projects anticipated to be over $1 million. I'd rather not have that be a part of that board policy, but if that's the will of the, you know, if that's what the board wants to do, you know, that's part of why I'm giving you all that information so that you can decide which direction you want to go with that. But I can say that, you know, as I've looked at it, I don't really see a huge benefit.
Thank you for
And-
looking into
and-
that, Dr. Johns. Oh, I'm sorry. I just had a quick question, if you
Go
don't
ahead.
mind. If the recommendation is to not adopt that, and if we would like to remove the amount threshold, then I think for us as a board, we just need to see what the recommended language looks like for us to approve, since that's going to be on the agenda for the regular meeting on the
Right.
26th.
It was in the document that I sent.
Right, I know that, but it's not in our agenda. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't posted on the agenda for tonight.
Oh, okay, I see what you're
Just
saying.
just so we can have that available for transparency purposes for the public that are viewing the agendas.
Sure, I can do that. Some part of the information I sent was listed as attorney-client privilege, so that's why I sent it individually as opposed to posting it on the agenda. But
Got it.
I'll figure out a way to get some of that so we can post that, so that'll be available for the public to see as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Then next I have a draft of dates for amended budget. And the 5-year projections. Asbestos abatement, I did show you a picture of. This is one of the rooms that they tented with the plastic, so you can kind of see what it looked like before they sealed it all off and started working. And then you see a couple pictures of what it looks like now, without any of that. I did get an email from the insurance adjuster today letting me know that by the end of the week, he will have worked with the,
Is that just concrete now?
it's just concrete, yeah. Worked with the restoration company to come up with a cost for finishing this area. And then at that point, we'll be able to get, if we want to move to the luxury vinyl tile, which requires less maintenance, then at that point, I'll be able to get a cost, an idea as to what that additional cost is. And that's why I went ahead and listed that on the possible items over 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the water, I did get a quote to add a chlorine sensor, but I still don't have quotes yet for the green sand or the charcoal filter system. So I'm going to email the contractor and see, you know, when he anticipates that we'll have those.
What is green sand?
It's just basically another way of filtering. And basically the green sand or the charcoal filter with the backwash type of system is more costly than the type of system we have now, but it will remove more of the smell from the water, the sulfur smell.
Yeah.
Which is something that seems to be a big, you know, is a big issue for
That we've grown to love.
for drinking water. So once I have that, I'll bring that back so you can see what those costs are.
I never heard that.
And then the school lunch update, just kind of giving you an idea. The next thing between now and the end of the year, I'm going to need to do a triennial wellness policy review. Has to be done every 3 years. Summer food service program, I'm kind of giving you some dates as to how long that's going to last. And then we're anticipating on providing a hot lunch program in the fall, which then will take us back to the regular national school lunch program instead of, so then at that point you'd have your full pay students, your free students, and your reduced students. So the reduced students pay 40 cents per meal, the free get it free, and then prior to the end of the year, we'll probably need to set those rates for next year for school lunches. I think that was it, isn't it? Yeah.
What was it currently, like $1.90 or something?
I actually have to go back and look. I think so. I think it was $1.90, $2, somewhere in that range.
You're looking at.
There is a requirement that, and so I have no idea how this is going to work this year, but in the past, basically they want somebody paying full price for the lunch to be paying more than what the feds reimburse us for the lunches, because they don't want to have the federal reimburses subsidizing the price of the regular lunches. So, but I don't know, you know, so much of this is, I even have to check and see where we're at as far as what the state's requiring for next year. Because we've been going in this mode of, you know, all the lunches are free, you know, and they will be, could be up until September 30th. So if we were still remote and or not serving lunch here with the half days like we have been, then we could stay on that program through September 30th. But once we come back into school, then, and we're serving lunch at school, then we go back to the National School Lunch Program.
Any more questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Johns. Board reports. Anybody do anything special last week? Talent show's coming up. I don't believe my kids are in it. So.
We have scheduled Teacher Appreciation Day at the end of the school year on Thursday, Veronica?
Yes, May 27th,
Is it
Thursday, May 27th.
Thursday, May 27th?
Yes.
The day before school gets out, so in the afternoon, the board is invited to participate in that, and be great. The winner all could go.
Isn't graduation like the 26th?
Graduation is the 26th, Wednesday night, the 26th. And there's 3 different forms of graduation. Parents get to choose which one they'd like to participate in. There's 2 ceremonies where you're up to 50 people, or 50 graduates could be in the ceremony, and we'll do kind of a walkthrough in the stage. They'll be outside, and parents and students will be in their cars, or by their cars, in the parking lot. And two sessions of those, and then the third session will be a drive-through. So the parents can choose. We did a drive-through last year outside. I thought it worked out quite nicely considering. So whatever people want to do.
We really get really good pictures.
Yeah.
Because you're the only car there, and your child is the only one up on the stage. So.
Yep.
Silver linings everywhere.
Right.
All right, if there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Then we are adjourned.